The words that burned. I will never forget the sound of laughter that echoed from the other side of the door. Loud, arrogant, and cruel. It was my brother's voice. "Come on, man," he said between fits of laughter. "My sister thinks she can give advice about marriage. Please, she should just stick to cooking and cleaning. That's all she's good for." The room roared with approval. Beer bottles clinked. Someone shouted, "Tell her to stay in the kitchen where she belongs." And then came the words that would change everything. "Yeah, my own brother, said. Stay in the kitchen, Emily." I stood frozen behind the door, holding the tray of appetizers I'd spent the whole morning preparing for his bachelor party. My hands trembled. The laughter inside felt like knives against my chest. I had grown up believing that family meant loyalty, that no matter what, your brother would have your back. But that night, listening to Daniel mock me in front of his friends, I realized something painful. Blood doesn't guarantee respect. I had always been the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who covered for him when he came home drunk at 16, the one who loaned him money for college when mom couldn't afford it, the one who sat beside his hospital bed after his motorcycle accident. And yet, in that moment, I was nothing more than a punchline. When I pushed open the door, the laughter stopped instantly. Daniel's eyes widened. I didn't know you were..." I set the tray down on the nearest table, careful not to let my shaking hands betray me. "You didn't know I was what? In the house? In the kitchen, maybe?" A few of his friends awkwardly looked away. One even muttered, "Dude, not cool." But Daniel just smirked. "It was a joke. Lighten up. You're too sensitive." Sensitive. That word. The one people use to excuse cruelty? "Right," I said quietly. "A joke." He grinned, trying to smooth things over. "Come on, sis. You know I love you." I looked at him then. Really looked. The tailored suit, the polished smile, the way he carried himself like the world owed him admiration. I used to think Daniel's confidence was something to admire, but now I saw it for what it truly was. Entitlement. I wanted to scream, to throw the tray of food across the room, to tell his friends how many nights I'd worked double shifts to help him pay off his debts. But instead, I turned around, left the room, and closed the door behind me. I didn't cry. Not then, not yet. But something inside me hardened. 2 days later, I was sitting in my apartment staring at my phone when a message popped up from an unknown number. "Hey, this is Jessica. Can we talk?" Jessica, my brother's fiancée. I hesitated before typing back. "Sure. What's this about?" Her reply came almost instantly. "I think your brother is hiding something from me, and I think you deserve to know too." I stared at the screen, confused, a cold feeling creeping up my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked. Then, one by one, she started sending screenshots, dozens of them, text messages, photos, late-night conversations between Daniel and another woman. My heart dropped as I scrolled through them. Flirtations, lies, promises he'd clearly never intended to keep. I wanted to deny it, to believe there was an explanation, but there wasn't. It was all there in black and white. Jessica sent one final message. "I don't know what to do, but I can't marry someone who lies like this. I thought you should see it too." I sat there, the phone glowing in my palm, my mind spinning. Part of me wanted to delete everything and walk away. It wasn't my relationship after all, but another part of me, the part that had been humiliated, dismissed, and told to stay in the kitchen, knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth. And I decided right then that if Daniel wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, he was about to learn exactly what kind of woman he had underestimated. The next few days were a blur. Jessica and I met in secret. She was shaken, not angry, not yet, just broken in a quiet, fragile way. "He always said your family was perfect," she said through tears, "that you all had this unbreakable bond." I laughed bitterly. That's what he wants people to think. But the truth is, he's been breaking things for years. He just hides the cracks. We sat together, two women bound by betrayal, and made a decision neither of us could take back. We would confront him at his own bachelor party, in front of everyone who had laughed with him when he said I belonged in the kitchen. The night of the party came quickly. I wore a black dress, simple, elegant, sharp. My hair pulled back, my face calm. Jessica arrived 20 minutes later, pale but determined. She handed me her phone with trembling fingers. "Everything's backed up. You ready?" I nodded. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might collapse. But under the fear was something else. Clarity. This wasn't just about exposing Daniel. It was about reclaiming my dignity. When I walked into the venue, the same laughter echoed again, the same kind of jokes. Only this time I didn't freeze behind the door. I walked straight in. Daniel turned, his grin fading when he saw me. "What are you doing here? This is for the guys." "Yeah," I said evenly. "I know. You told me to stay in the kitchen, remember?" The room fell silent. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and projected the first message onto the big screen behind the bar. Every man in the room turned to look. At first, confusion, then shock, then horror. Daniel's face went pale as the texts scrolled across the screen, his words to another woman, his late-night promises, his lies to Jessica. Jessica stepped forward then, her voice trembling but strong. "I thought I was marrying a good man. I was wrong." The silence was suffocating. Daniel reached for her. "Jess, please." She stepped back. "Don't. You've humiliated enough people for one lifetime." And then she looked at me, with gratitude, not blame, before walking out of the venue. The night ended in chaos. Daniel shouted, his friends avoided eye contact, and I walked out with my head held high for the first time in years. But the story didn't end there, because 2 weeks later, something arrived in the mail, an envelope, plain, unmarked. Inside was a document that would tear open the final truth about my family, the DNA results, the envelope that changed everything. For 2 days, I didn't open it. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter, taunting me. Every time I walked by, my stomach tightened. The return address was from a private DNA testing lab, one I recognized because Mom had ordered a fun family ancestry kit a few months earlier. She said it was just for curiosity, but this envelope wasn't addressed to her. It was addressed to me. At first, I thought it might have been sent by mistake. Then I noticed the handwriting, not from a company, but someone who had wanted me to receive it personally. Jessica. My chest tightened. She must have sent it before leaving town. She'd gone silent since the bachelor party, deleted her socials, blocked Daniel, moved out of their apartment. I didn't blame her. After what she went through, she deserved peace. But why would she send me a DNA test? That night, I sat alone at my dining table, the lights dim, the envelope between my hands. I ran my thumb along the seal, hesitated, and then tore it open. Inside was a letter, handwritten, and a set of lab results. The letter began simply, "Emily, I didn't know if I should send this, but after everything that happened, I felt you deserved to know. When I was packing my things, I found these in Daniel's drawer. He must have ordered them weeks ago, maybe even before the wedding. I didn't open them. I'm sorry if this hurts you, but I think it's something you need to see. Jessica." My heart began to race. I unfolded the results. There were names printed at the top. Mine, Daniel's, and a third one I didn't expect, Robert and Margaret Thompson, my parents. The section labeled Relationship Probability made my breath catch in my throat. Daniel Thompson, 99.9% biological child of Robert and Margaret Thompson. Emily Thompson, 0% biological child of Robert and Margaret Thompson. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I reread it again and again, the words swimming through my tears. 0%. It felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Everything I thought I knew about my family, my childhood, my memories, my place in this world, shattered like glass. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't Daniel's sister, and suddenly, all of his cruelty, all of his mockery, all of the coldness from my parents, it all made sense. I sat there for hours staring at that paper. Every small, painful moment came flooding back. How Mom always introduced Daniel first at family gatherings, proudly calling him our boy. How Dad had framed Daniel's graduation photo in the living room, but mine was tucked away in the hallway. How, when I'd asked once why I didn't look much like them, Mom had laughed it off. "You just got the recessive genes, sweetheart." And now I knew the truth. I was never one of them. The next morning, I called my parents. My hands shook as the phone rang. Mom answered, her voice calm and polished as ever. "Hello, Emily." "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "I got something in the mail." A pause. "What kind of something?" "A DNA test, from Daniel's drawer." Silence. "Do you want to tell me why it says I'm not your daughter?" I could hear her sharp inhale, the kind of silence that feels like a scream. "Emily, I think you're confused." "Don't," I said, my voice shaking. "Don't lie. I've spent my whole life feeling like I didn't belong, and now I know why." There was another long pause. Then, softly, "I was going to tell you one day." The calmness in her tone broke something inside me. "One day? When, Mom? When I turned 40? When I died?" Her voice quivered. "You were adopted. It wasn't supposed to be a secret forever. You were a miracle to us." "A miracle?" I laughed bitterly through tears. "You let your son humiliate me in front of everyone. You treated me like an outsider in my own home. Was that part of the miracle?" "Emily, please." But I couldn't listen. I hung up before she could finish. For the next week, I didn't speak to anyone. The world felt foreign, like every memory had been rewritten in a language I no longer understood. I barely ate. I barely slept. But amid the chaos, one feeling began to grow inside me, a strange, quiet strength. Because for the first time in my life, I understood something powerful. I wasn't the weak one. I wasn't the unwanted one. I was the survivor of a life built on half-truths. A few nights later, I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen. I typed "private investigator" near me. If my parents wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. It took 3 weeks, but eventually I got the call. The investigator's voice was calm but hesitant. "Miss Thompson," or I suppose Miss Walker might be more accurate. "We found something." I felt my breath hitch. "Walker?" "Yes, according to hospital records, you were born Emily Walker. Your birth mother, Anna Walker, passed away shortly after childbirth. There's more, but I think you might want to see it in person." My hands trembled. "More?" "Yes," he said gently. "You have another sibling." The room spun around me. "Who?" There was a long pause before he answered. "Jessica Walker." The name hit me like a thunderclap. Jessica, Daniel's fiancée. I dropped the phone, my knees buckling beneath me. Jessica. The woman who had exposed Daniel's lies. The one who had trusted me. The one who had said, "I think your brother is hiding something, and you deserve to know too." She wasn't just Daniel's ex-fiancée. She was my sister. And suddenly, I understood everything. The strange familiarity when we met. The unexplainable connection I'd felt. We weren't just two women brought together by betrayal. We were two halves of a story neither of us knew we were living. I sat there in the dark, the city lights flickering through my window, tears streaming down my face, not from pain this time, but from clarity. Daniel had called me worthless. My parents had lied to me. But the truth, my truth, had finally found its way home. And I knew what I had to do next. It was time to confront all of them. Not with anger, but with truth. Because the truth, I realized, is the one thing they could never take from me again. The confrontation. The night I decided to confront them, the air felt heavier than usual. like the universe itself was holding its breath. I had spent the past few days trying to gather my thoughts, but every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger. Not because of what the DNA said, but because I no longer recognized the woman who once sought her family's approval. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who had nothing left to lose, and that made her powerful. I called Jessica first. When she picked up, there was silence. Then her voice, soft, careful. "Emily?" "Hi," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to talk in person." There was a pause. Then, "I thought you'd say that." We met at a small cafe outside of town. I hadn't seen her since that chaotic night at the bachelor party. She looked different, tired but freer, like she'd let go of a weight she'd carried too long. She smiled sadly as she sat down. "You opened it, didn't you?" I nodded. "Yeah, I did." Her eyes filled with guilt. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep that secret. When I found the test in Daniel's drawer, I thought it was another one of his manipulative games. I never imagined it was real." I took a deep breath. "Jessica, they said you're my sister." Her eyes widened, glistening with tears. "I was hoping you'd say that out loud before I did. I didn't want to sound insane." We sat there staring at each other. Two women who'd been lied to by the same man, bound by something deeper than betrayal. "I found our mother's name," I whispered. "Anna Walker. She died after giving birth to me." Jessica's lips trembled. I remember being little and hearing whispers about another baby. Mom always changed the subject when I asked. "So they gave me away," I said bitterly. "And somehow I ended up with the Thompsons." Jessica reached across the table, taking my hand. "You ended up where you were meant to uncover the truth. Maybe it took time, but you found your way back." I squeezed her hand, blinking back tears. "I want to confront them, all of them, but not with anger. I want answers. I want peace." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll be there with you." That Sunday, I drove to my parents' house, or what I once thought was my parents' house, with Jessica sitting quietly beside me. Daniel's car was already in the driveway, a sleek, black BMW. Typical. When I stepped out, I could hear laughter from inside, the kind of laughter that used to make me feel like I was outside looking through a window. But this time, I wasn't the outsider. I was the storm walking through the door. Mom was in the kitchen, apron tied neatly around her waist, just like always. She looked up and froze when she saw Jessica behind me. "Emily," her voice faltered. "What is she doing here?" Jessica spoke first. "We thought it was time everyone heard the truth." Dad came out from the living room, his face already tense. "What is this about?" Before I could answer, Daniel walked in, holding a beer. His smirk froze when he saw Jessica. "Oh, this should be good," he said, sarcastic as ever. "What are you doing here? You ruined one party and now you're back for an encore?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, Daniel, this isn't about your party, it's about your DNA test." His expression shifted. He blinked, then sneered. "You went through my stuff?" "I didn't," I said, stepping closer. "Jessica found it, and she sent it to me. Because it turns out the woman you loved, the one you cheated on, had more honesty in her pinky finger than this entire family combined." His smirk faded. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out the test results from my bag and placed them on the kitchen island. "This, it says I'm not related to any of you." Mom turned pale. Dad looked away. I turned to them. "You could have told me the truth. I would have understood. I would have forgiven you. But instead, you let me grow up thinking I was less than him." I pointed at Daniel. "Because I wasn't good enough. All the while you knew I wasn't even your daughter." Mom whispered, "Emily, please." "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to ask for silence now. You don't get to tell me when I can speak." The room went still. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the space. Then Jessica stepped forward. "She's not your daughter," she said quietly, "but she's my sister." Daniel blinked, confused. "What?" Jessica turned to him, her voice trembling but steady. Her birth mother was Anna Walker, my mother. Emily is my sister. You were about to marry my sister. The color drained from Daniel's face. His beer slipped from his hand, crashing onto the tile. Mom gasped. Dad muttered, "My God!" Daniel's voice cracked. "You're lying." I shook my head. "No, I wish we were." The silence that followed was suffocating. Years of lies, favoritism, and manipulation collapsed into that one fragile moment. Daniel sank into a chair, staring blankly at the floor. For the first time, he looked small, like the man behind the arrogance had finally been exposed. I turned to Mom. Why? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" She covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "We couldn't have children after Daniel. We were desperate. When Anna died, she had no family left, except her little girl. The hospital said she had no one to claim her. We loved you like our own." I swallowed hard. "Then why did you treat me like I was less?" Dad spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, heavy. "Because we were ashamed. We told people you were ours. It was easier to pretend." Easier. That word sliced deeper than anything else. I looked at Jessica, then back at them. Well, the pretending ends today. Before leaving, I turned to Daniel one last time. He was still staring at the papers, his hands shaking. He looked up at me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, I didn't know." I studied his face, for once, stripped of pride. I could tell he meant it, but it didn't erase what he'd done. "You didn't have to know," I said softly. "You just had to be kind." And with that, I walked out the door, leaving behind the only home I'd ever known and the people who never truly saw me. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I had truth. I had Jessica. And for the first time, I had me. That night, Jessica and I sat on her apartment balcony, watching the city lights stretch out like a map of possibilities. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "No," I said after a long pause. "I thought I'd feel broken, but I just feel free." She smiled softly. "Then maybe this is where our real family starts." I looked at her, my sister, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, belonging, the cracks in his kingdom. In the weeks after that confrontation, silence settled over everything. My parents didn't call, they didn't text, not a single apology. I think they were too busy trying to keep their perfect image intact, a facade they'd polished for decades. But the truth had already slipped through their fingers, and it was spreading faster than they realized. I didn't mean for it to go public, but Daniel had always been reckless. And this time, his own arrogance did the work for me. It started with a phone call from one of his old friends, a guy named Trevor, who had been at the bachelor party. "Emily," he said, his tone low and hesitant, "I think you should know something. Daniel's been telling people that you made up the DNA stuff. He says you're just jealous of him and his life falling apart." I sighed, almost amused. "That sounds like him." "Yeah, well, I didn't believe him," Trevor continued, "because one of the guys said Jessica posted something. You might want to check." My stomach dropped. I hung up and opened Instagram. Jessica's account was private, but she had tagged me in a post. The caption read, "Truth is the only cure for arrogance. Family isn't blood, it's honesty." Attached were 2 images, the DNA report and a photo of her and me together, arms around each other, smiling like sisters who'd been through fire and survived it. The post exploded overnight. Comments poured in. Friends, co-workers, even distant relatives who had always adored Daniel. And suddenly, the golden boy of the family wasn't so golden anymore. Daniel called me the next morning. His voice was sharp, controlled rage. "What the hell did you do, Emily?" I stayed calm. "I didn't do anything. Jessica posted the truth." "You ruined me," he shouted. "My clients are calling. My friends won't talk to me." I cut him off. "You ruined yourself the day you decided other people's worth was beneath yours." He laughed bitterly. "You think this makes you the hero? You're still a nobody." There was no anger in me anymore, just quiet pity. Maybe, but at least I'm a nobody who can look in the mirror. Then I hung up. The fallout came fast. Rumors swirled through Daniel's social circle. Some said he'd been lying about more than just his engagement, that he'd cheated on Jessica multiple times, that he'd used company funds to pay for his luxury lifestyle. His boss eventually found out. Within 2 weeks, he was fired. Meanwhile, I'd gone back to therapy, something I hadn't done since college. I told my therapist everything, from the childhood insults to the DNA test. She looked at me, kind but firm. You've spent your life seeking validation from people who couldn't give it. Now you get to define your own worth. That sentence stayed with me. For the first time, I started thinking about who I wanted to be, not as a sister or a daughter, but as a woman, rebuilding her own story. Jessica and I grew closer than ever. We met every Sunday, sometimes cooking dinner together, sometimes just talking until midnight. One night, over glasses of wine, she asked, "Do you ever wonder what Mom was like?" "All the time," I said. "I wish I could have met her. Maybe she would have understood me in a way no one else did." Jessica smiled softly. "I think she'd be proud of us." We turned pain into truth. That night, I went home and wrote for hours, not for revenge, not for closure, just to document the storm that had shaped me, so I'd never forget how far I'd come. 2 months later, I received an email from Daniel. No subject line, just his name. I hesitated, then opened it. "Emily, I've lost everything. My job, my friends, even Mom and Dad won't talk to me. I know you'll say I deserve it, and maybe I do. But I wanted you to know I'm sorry. You were never weak. You were never an embarrassment. I was just too small to admit it. Daniel." I stared at the message for a long time, and instead of anger, I felt compassion. Not the kind that excuses, but the kind that finally sets you free. I typed one line back. "Forgiveness doesn't erase truth, but it lets us move forward." Then I hit send. Life, I realized, has a strange way of balancing things. Daniel's downfall wasn't my victory. It was simply the consequence of truth doing what truth always does, finding light. But my victory, it was quiet. It was internal. It was waking up every morning no longer needing approval from anyone to feel like I belonged in this world. A few weeks later, Jessica and I took a road trip. No destination, just open roads, old songs, and laughter that felt like freedom. At one stop, she handed me a small box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a tiny W pendant. "For Walker," she said, smiling. "For who you really are." I clasped it around my neck, tears blurring my vision. For the first time, the name didn't feel like a reminder of loss. It felt like a beginning. But what I didn't know then, as the wind whipped through our hair and the horizon stretched wide open, was that the story wasn't over yet, because a month later, a new letter would arrive, and the truth inside it would shake everything I thought I'd finally understood. The DNA aftershock. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Ordinary day, quiet sky, coffee brewing in the background. But the moment I saw it, that white, official-looking envelope with the same testing company's logo on it, my heart began to race. I hadn't ordered another test. The return address read, Office of Dr. Stephen Keller, Genetic Counseling Division. For a second, I thought maybe it was a follow-up or some clerical correction, but when I opened it, the first line made my stomach drop. This letter concerns the recently updated genealogical findings pertaining to your DNA sample and its connection to the Walker family case. The Walker family case. It sounded like something out of a crime documentary. I read on. New data cross-referenced with updated submissions has revealed that you, Emily Walker, are biologically related to one of the Walker parents, specifically your mother, Margaret Walker. This supersedes the prior assumption of non-biological relation. There was a laboratory mix-up with your half-brother Daniel's sample at the time of the initial analysis. I froze, then read it again and again. It didn't make sense. The first test had said I wasn't biologically related to either parent, only Jessica. Now it said I was my mother's daughter. I sat down hard on the kitchen floor, the letter trembling in my hand. The tears didn't come right away, only confusion, and then a quiet, rising anger. Not at the mistake, but at everything that mistake had cost me. That night, I called the lab's office directly. After a maze of hold music and apologies, Dr. Keller himself got on the line. He explained that years ago, during the first test, there had been a cross-contamination issue. 2 samples labeled incorrectly. Daniel's, it turned out, had been switched with another person's. The conclusion, Daniel wasn't Mom's biological child. I was. The silence that followed was suffocating. So, I whispered, all this time the wrong child was wearing the crown? Dr. Keller exhaled softly. I can't imagine what this means for you, but yes, Ms. Walker, the results were inverted. When I told Jessica, she stared at me pale and speechless. Then she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Emily, she said, voice trembling, this changes everything. I shook my head. It doesn't. It just proves that biology doesn't make family. Choices do. But still, that night I cried. Not because I wanted revenge, not even because of the irony, but because for 30 years I'd believed I wasn't enough, that I was the outsider. Now the truth had twisted full circle, and it hurt in an entirely new way. A week later, I decided to visit my parents. I hadn't seen them since the bachelor party chaos, but something in me needed to face them again, not for closure, but for peace. When I arrived, Mom was sitting on the porch, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked older, thinner, but her eyes softened when she saw me. Emily, she said quietly. I held up the envelope. You've seen it? She nodded. Tears glistened in her eyes. We got our copy 2 days ago. I sat beside her. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air smelled of jasmine and rain. Finally, she said, when you were born, I remember holding you and thinking, she's going to be different. You had this calmness about you, even as a baby, but I never realized how different everything really was. Her voice broke. We made you feel like a stranger in your own home, and I will regret that until the day I die. I put my hand on hers. You can stop regretting. I forgive you, Mom. She began to cry, shoulders shaking. You shouldn't have to. I don't want to live in anger anymore, I said softly. The truth is enough. Daniel, however, didn't take it well. He called me again, his tone sharp, desperate, almost paranoid. They're lying, he barked. This is just another way to make me look bad. I don't care what some test says. I'm her son. You are, I said gently. Maybe not by blood, but you'll always be her son. He laughed bitterly. Don't pity me. I'm not, I said. I just think maybe now you know what it's like to feel like you don't belong. There was silence. Then he whispered, almost to himself, I don't know who I am anymore. And for the first time in my life, I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Humility. The weeks that followed were strange. My family tried to reconnect. Awkward dinners, half-hearted apologies, stories retold through the new lens of truth. But something had shifted permanently. For so long, I had lived in Daniel's shadow. Now, he stood in mine. And it didn't feel triumphant. It felt tragic. Because winning isn't always about justice. Sometimes it's about learning how to carry truth without letting it poison you. One evening, Jessica and I sat watching the sunset from my apartment balcony. She was flipping through her phone, scrolling past news articles about the Walker DNA scandal. It had somehow made the local press after a friend of Daniel's leaked it. She sighed. You know, if this were a movie, this would be your big I told you so moment. I smiled faintly. Yeah, but life's not a movie. There's no soundtrack, no applause, just silence and what you choose to do next. So what will you do next? I looked out at the skyline, lights blinking against the dusk. Live, honestly, quietly, maybe even happily. That's enough. 3 months later, I received a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a Rolex, the same model Daniel used to flaunt at every family gathering, but engraved on the back in shaky handwriting were the words, "To my sister. You were always man enough for this family." I didn't cry this time. I just smiled, tracing the words with my thumb. It was the first time Daniel had ever called me his sister, without mockery, without ego. It was the closest thing to redemption I could hope for. I keep that watch on my dresser now, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. That family isn't about who shares your blood, but who's brave enough to face the truth with you. That strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers, "You survived." And that sometimes the greatest justice isn't revenge, it's peace. As I stood by my window that night, the city humming softly below, I thought about the long road that had brought me here. From the girl who was told to stay in the kitchen to the woman who stood in the light of her own truth, unshaken, unashamed, and finally free. Because the DNA results didn't define me. They just confirmed what I'd always known deep down. I was never the weak one. I was the one who broke the cycle. And that is the kind of strength no test can measure.